I never thought I'd be the kind of person to fight over a will. That always seemed like something out of a movie or one of those messy stories you hear at Thanksgiving. But life has a way of humbling you, doesn't it? My name's Lauren. I'm 35, born and raised in Savannah, Georgia. My father, Richard, passed away last spring. He was the kind of dad who never raised his voice, who built his life from nothing, and who always told me I could do anything if I worked hard enough. And I did. I moved out at 22, got my MBA, and started a small business I was proud of. But even with my independence, I always called home on Sundays, always came home for Christmas, always sent him photos of the little things like my first office or my dog when he learned a new trick. We were close, which is why what happened shook me to my core. When Dad passed, it was sudden, a heart attack. I was there within 3 hours, still wearing my work heels, mascara running. My stepmother, Diane, met me at the door. She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She just said, "The lawyer will be in touch." That's all she said. Now let me back up a little. Diane came into our lives when I was 17. My mom had died years before, and at first I was glad Dad found someone to love again. Diane was warm and funny in public, but behind closed doors there was always this chill. We tolerated each other. I tried to keep things cordial, out of respect for Dad, but we were never close. After the funeral, I expected at least some awkward family moments, maybe some shared memories, but Diane barely looked at me. She started referring to herself as the only one Richard ever trusted. It felt weird. Off, like she was laying groundwork for something. And then the will was read. I showed up at the lawyer's office in a blazer and jeans, trying to stay strong. Diane sat across from me in head-to-toe black, like she was starring in a Southern Gothic film. And then the bomb dropped. Dad had left everything to her. The house, the land, his savings, even his antique car. There was no mention of me. Not even a letter. I sat there frozen, my hands gripping the chair so tight my knuckles turned white. The lawyer kept reading, his voice flat like this was routine. But my world had just cracked wide open. Diane turned to me with a look I'll never forget. Smug, victorious, as if this had been her plan all along. I wanted to scream, to accuse, to cry. But I didn't. I just said there must be some mistake. And Diane replied, calm as anything, "Your father changed the will last year. He didn't want to burden you." Burden me? That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. And I wasn't gonna let it go. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying the lawyer's words in my head. Your father changed the will last year. Changed it? Without telling me? That didn't sound like Dad. He wasn't the kind of man who made life-altering decisions in secret. He believed in transparency, in fairness, especially with me. But it wasn't just the shock. It was the timing. A year ago? That was around the same time he started missing our weekly phone calls, the same time Diane began answering his cell more often than he did. I had chalked it up to him getting older, but now? I wasn't so sure. I decided to request a copy of the revised will. Georgia law gave me the right, even if I wasn't named in it. When I got it, my heart sank even further. It was brief, cold, and clinical. No explanation, no personal note, just a simple line. All assets and property to be transferred to Diane Whitmore, spouse. I knew Dad. He wouldn't have done that, not unless something changed his mind. So I started digging. The first place I went was the nursing aide who had helped him off and on toward the end. Her name was Miss Carla, and I remembered her because Dad had once told me she made the best peach cobbler in town. She worked at a facility not far from Dad's house, and when I showed up unannounced, she looked surprised but sympathetic. "He talked about you all the time," she said, inviting me into the break room. "He was proud of you. Said you had more backbone than anyone he knew. So why would he leave me nothing?" When I asked her if she'd noticed anything strange in the last year of his life, her smile faded. He wasn't himself, she said carefully. There were days he seemed nervous. Not physically, but emotionally, especially when Diane was around. That was all the confirmation I needed. I went home and pulled out every voicemail, text, and email I had saved. The last long message from Dad had been over a year ago, before the change in the will. After that, only short replies, mostly typed. No more voice messages. No, love you, baby girl. It wasn't just absence, it was erasure. My gut told me there was more, and if Diane had manipulated him, coerced him, or, God forbid, forged his signature, I had to find out. I started with the date of the will. According to the document, it had been signed in April of the previous year. That same month, I remembered Dad had been in the hospital for a week after a minor stroke. He had called me from the ER, sounding scared and confused. But somehow, during that week, he'd found the mental clarity to sign over his life's work to Diane. It didn't add up. So I called the attorney who'd written the will, not the one who read it. This was the one listed in the footer of the document. His name was Greg Timmons, and he agreed to a quick call. When I asked if he remembered my father, there was a pause. And then he said, "Actually, I don't remember meeting with him at all." My stomach dropped. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about grief or bitterness. It was about truth, and I wasn't going to stop until I had it. I remember sitting in my car after that phone call, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. I don't remember meeting with him at all. That one sentence kept echoing in my mind. Greg Timmons, the attorney whose name was on the bottom of the will, had never even met my father. That didn't just raise a red flag, it set off sirens. I asked him straight out, "So who brought the paperwork in?" He said, "His wife handled everything. She said your father had mobility issues and preferred to sign from home." Of course she did. I thanked him, hung up, and just sat there for a while. My dad had always been careful. He wasn't the kind of man who signed legal documents casually, especially ones that gave away everything he'd worked for. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. But I couldn't accuse Diane without proof. I needed something solid, and if I was right, the answer would be in the signature. So I called up one of my dad's old business partners, Mr. Langley. He had worked with Dad for over 20 years and still had contracts and documents with his signature on file. I asked him if he could scan and send me a few samples. He didn't ask too many questions, just said, "Anything you need, sweetheart." The moment I got those samples, I pulled up the scanned will on my laptop and laid them side by side. My heart was pounding. The signature on the new will didn't match. Dad's signature was neat, strong, and fluid even when he got older. The one on this will? It looked shaky, inconsistent. Certain letters were oddly formed, as if someone had tried too hard to mimic it. It was almost right, but it wasn't him. And the date, April 14th, the exact day he was discharged from the hospital, barely able to walk without a cane. I sent everything to a handwriting expert. I didn't want to jump to conclusions without someone qualified confirming what I suspected. A woman named Carla James, a forensic document examiner in Atlanta, agreed to look at it. While I waited for her report, I kept digging. I went through bank statements, credit card charges, emails, anything I could legally access. That's when I found something even more disturbing. The same day the will was supposedly signed, Diane had hired a notary to come to the house. But guess who signed as the witness? Diane's cousin, someone with a criminal record for document fraud. That was it. I felt cold, furious, and sick all at once. This wasn't just emotional manipulation, this was fraud. Diane hadn't taken control because Dad wanted her to. She had engineered it. and I was finally ready to fight. The moment I got the preliminary handwriting analysis back, I knew I had a case. Carla James, the expert from Atlanta, had called me directly. Her voice was calm, professional, but what she said lit a fire inside me. "There are multiple inconsistencies in the signature attributed to your father," she said. "Based on our comparison, it's extremely unlikely that he signed the will voluntarily or that he signed it at all." That was it. I had what I needed. But the truth is, I wasn't ready to go to court, not yet. Not until I looked Diane in the eyes one more time and gave her a chance to admit it. So I called her. I said, "Diane, I'd like to come by and go through some of Dad's old things. You know, photos, keepsakes. Just for closure." She hesitated, just for a second. Then, like always, she slipped back into that sweet, polished tone. "Of course, honey. I'll leave the door unlocked for you. I'll be out most of the day." That alone was suspicious. Diane never left her house when she knew I'd be around. But I wasn't scared. I was ready. When I stepped into the house, it was like time had stopped. My dad's recliner still faced the TV. His flannel jacket was still hanging on the hook by the door. But it all felt wrong. Like a stage set. Familiar objects with no soul behind them. I went into his study. That's where Dad kept everything important. His will, his business files, even old birthday cards from me. I knew he had a safe somewhere, but I'd never seen it open. I started checking the usual spots, and behind a stack of books, I found it. It was small, old, and dusty, the kind of safe that uses a simple combo lock. I tried the obvious birthdays, mine, Mom's, even Diane's. Nothing. Then I paused and typed in Dad's birthday backwards. Click. It opened. Inside were a few things. A box of war medals, a stack of old letters, and a manila folder labeled "Updated Will to be filed." My hands were shaking. I pulled it out, opened the folder, and there it was. A handwritten letter from Dad dated 4 months after the will Diane had filed. It said he wanted to amend his will to split his estate fairly between Diane and me. He even mentioned the land in McIntosh County he'd always promised me. But the new version, it was unsigned. He must have written it but never gotten the chance to file it. Maybe Diane had found out. My chest tightened. I couldn't prove what she did inside his mind, but I could prove the forgery. And now I could prove intent. Dad wanted things to be fair. He hadn't cut me out of love, he just never got the chance to fix it. I took photos of everything. Every page, every date. I even called a friend from law school, Kara, who now worked in estate litigation in Atlanta. "Bring it all to me," she said. "You've got more than enough to make her sweat." And just like that, I walked out of that house not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who was about to take back what was hers. I met Kara at her office in Atlanta the next morning, clutching the manila folder like it was my last lifeline. Her office was sleek, all glass and marble, with diplomas from Emory and photos of courtroom victories on the walls. But when she saw what I had, her lawyer face turned into something more personal. Concern. "Lauren," she said after flipping through the scanned will, the forgery report, and Dad's handwritten letter, "this isn't just a bad signature. This is a setup." She explained that in Georgia, proving fraud in a will isn't easy. The courts lean toward whatever's filed and notarized unless you can prove manipulation or mental incapacity at the time of signing. But I had more than that. I had intent, documented intent. And the cherry on top? Diane's cousin, the notary witness with a fraud conviction. Kara sat back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said, "We're not just going to contest the will. We're going to expose what she did." We filed a petition to challenge the will. That was step 1. It meant Diane would be served legal notice. I braced myself for what I knew was coming. Rage, denial, and her favorite weapon, fake innocence. It didn't take long. She called me 2 days after the court papers were delivered. "How dare you?" she snapped through the phone. "Richard wanted me to have everything. You think you can just crawl back and take it from me?" Her mask was gone. No more sweet southern charm. Just venom. "You forged his signature, Diane," I said calmly. "I have a forensic report, and the lawyer doesn't even remember seeing him. So, unless you want this to go public..." She cut me off. "This will ruin you, not me." And then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the blank screen on my phone. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I really ready for this fight? Lawsuits are ugly, expensive, exhausting. But then I looked at the photo on my fridge. Me and Dad, fishing at Lake Lanier. Him with that goofy sun hat and a proud smile. He would have wanted me to stand up, not just for the money, but for the truth. Over the next few weeks, Diane tried everything. Her lawyer sent us a cease and desist. She posted cryptic messages on Facebook making me out to be an ungrateful, greedy daughter. She even showed up at my office once, demanding I let it go and respect the dead. But I didn't flinch. Kara was relentless. We subpoenaed the notary, filed a request for handwriting verification, and submitted Dad's medical records from the week he allegedly changed the will. They showed he was still recovering from a stroke and under heavy medication. Piece by piece, Diane's story started to crumble. And the best part? The court granted us a preliminary hearing. That meant everything was about to go public. And Diane, she wasn't ready for that. The courtroom was packed tighter than I expected. Diane showed up in a navy blue pantsuit, pearls, and that same fake smile she wore at Dad's funeral. She brought her own attorney, a slick guy with cufflinks and an overconfident swagger, the kind of man who thought calling me young lady in front of a judge was a smart move. Spoiler, it wasn't. I sat at our table with Kara, who looked composed and lethal. She leaned over and whispered, "Just breathe, let the facts do the talking." I tried, but my heart was pounding. All I kept thinking was, this shouldn't be happening. My dad would have hated this. And yet, here we were. The judge reviewed our petition, flipping through pages of the forged will, the medical records, the letter Dad never got to sign. He asked sharp, direct questions, and Kara was ready for every one of them. Then came the notary, Diane's cousin. He looked nervous the moment he was sworn in. Under oath, he admitted he hadn't known my father personally and couldn't say for certain that it was him who signed the will. "Were you present when he signed?" the judge asked. There was a long pause. And then, "No, sir," Diane said he'd already signed it before I got there. Kara leaned in and her voice cut like a knife. "So, to be clear, you did not personally witness Mr. Richard Whitmore sign this will?" "No, ma'am," he muttered. It was like the air got sucked out of the room. Then came the handwriting expert. Carla James took the stand with charts and overlays showing clear inconsistencies between Dad's known signatures and the one on the revised will. She was calm, professional, and devastatingly clear. In my expert opinion, she concluded, this signature was either traced or forged. It does not match the natural characteristics of Mr. Whitmore's handwriting. Diane's lawyer tried to object, tried to discredit Carla, tried to argue that Dad had wanted to simplify things and leave everything to his wife. But it didn't hold up, especially not after Kara presented the handwritten letter Dad had drafted, the one from the safe, dated after the will Diane filed. It outlined his intention to divide the estate fairly, even listing specific properties and funds meant for me. That letter changed everything. By the time we recessed for lunch, Diane looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her hands shook as she fumbled with her purse. She kept whispering to her attorney, who just kept nodding and rubbing his forehead. And when we returned to court, the judge made his position very clear. This court sees credible evidence of will manipulation and forgery. Pending further review, the will in question is hereby suspended and the estate is to be frozen until this case is resolved. It wasn't a final verdict, but it was a win. A big one. Diane stormed out of the courtroom, avoiding my eyes. And for the first time since my father passed, I felt like I was finally standing on solid ground again. After that first court victory, something shifted. Diane went silent. No more public outbursts, no phone calls, no passive-aggressive Facebook posts. For weeks, she just disappeared. But her lawyer? He kept fighting, filing motions, requesting delays, trying to intimidate us with legal jargon and bureaucracy. Kara stayed calm through all of it. I honestly don't know what I would have done without her. Every time I got overwhelmed, she'd remind me, this is what people like Diane count on, you giving up, you backing down. But you're not that girl. She was right, I wasn't. I started preparing emotionally for trial, knowing we might be heading for a full-blown court battle. But then, Diane made a mistake. She tried to cash out one of my father's old investment accounts, one that wasn't listed in the will but had my name on it as a secondary beneficiary. The bank flagged it immediately. I got a call from their fraud department asking if I'd authorized the withdrawal. I hadn't. When I told them what was happening, they launched an internal investigation. Turned out Diane had attempted to access multiple accounts by pretending to be me, using a fake email address and phone number registered under my name. That was the final nail in the coffin. We submitted the bank's report to the court along with the IP addresses and fake contact information she used. Kara added it to our fraud claim, and this time the court didn't just freeze the estate. They ordered a full forensic audit. Diane was officially under investigation. And then, the twist I didn't expect? Her own lawyer quit. Just like that. Filed to withdraw from the case. Said he couldn't ethically represent her any longer. That told me everything I needed to know. Soon after, we were offered mediation. Kara and I talked through the terms. The estate would be divided fairly, the house, the savings, the land in McIntosh County, everything Dad had wanted. But more than that, Diane had to sign a statement admitting she had misrepresented key facts surrounding the execution of the will. She fought that wording for days, but eventually she caved. I sat across from her in that mediation room and watched her sign her name on the agreement. Her hand trembled. She didn't look at me once. And I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because the woman who once tried to erase me, who took over everything like she'd won, was finally exposed. And I had taken back control. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about my father's legacy, about knowing he hadn't chosen to forget me, that he hadn't turned cold or selfish in the end. He was silenced, and I had found his voice. The day the settlement was finalized, I drove straight to McIntosh County. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager, back when Dad used to take me out there every summer to walk the land, talk about building a cabin or maybe a little peach orchard. I thought he was just dreaming back then. But after everything that happened, I realized that land meant something deeper to him. It was peace. And in a way, it was his promise to me. I stood at the edge of the property, boots sinking slightly into the soil, and let the silence settle around me. For the first time since he passed, I didn't feel the weight of betrayal anymore. I felt grounded, certain, whole. It had taken everything, tears, money, months of mental and emotional exhaustion, to get here. But I didn't regret it. Not for a second. Because the truth is, this was never just about the will. It was about not letting someone rewrite the story of who my father was. It was about refusing to be erased. About standing up not just for what was mine legally, but for what was right. Diane moved out of my dad's house shortly after the settlement. I didn't care where she went. She no longer had power over me. Not in court, not in memory, not in spirit. I heard later that she tried to spin her version of the story to some of my relatives, but they knew better now. The truth had come out, and her lies didn't hold up anymore. As for me, I'm building something new. I've decided to renovate the old farmhouse on the McIntosh property. I'm turning it into a retreat for women who've gone through inheritance disputes, toxic family breakups, or just felt forgotten. a place for healing, a place where no one is left out of the story. I still miss my dad every day. Sometimes, I'll hear a song on the radio or see a truck like his and feel that familiar ache in my chest. But now, it's not mixed with doubt or pain. Because I know he never meant to leave me behind. He just didn't get the chance to fix what she broke. But I did. I took back the narrative. I took back control. And in doing so, I found something even more powerful than justice. I found peace.